Hey folks, my name's Ed Trevors. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Way. Now, I suspect you and I watched some of the same stuff yesterday. We at least heard the news that the 3 men in Georgia who were convicted for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery were sentenced. Well, I happened to tune in for the sentencing and caught the judge's remarks before he actually handed down his decision. And I was really taken aback by what he said. Because what he said 2 things that we're going to talk about. But the first thing was something that we often talk about on this channel. It strikes me that we talk about this 2-3 times a week sometimes on this channel. Because it is so key. It is so foundational to living a Christian life. What he says is, and he was quoting somebody who he couldn't remember. But what the judge offered was, we need to expand our understanding of who our neighbor is. Because our neighbor, he says, is not just the people who own property around our house. This is Gospel 101. Right? It is foundational Gospel 101. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Right? We know this. This is what Jesus teaches over and over and over again. You got to love your neighbor as you love yourself. You got to love one another as you love yourself. You've got to love each other as I have loved you. It's continuous. Jesus is continuously telling us to love the people around us just like we love ourselves and more. Over and over and over again. But Jesus also literally at one point teaches a lesson about expanding our understanding of who our neighbor is, just as the judge asks us to do, because he wasn't just talking to the 3 men who were convicted. He was saying, this is something for all of us to learn. This is something for all of us to do. All of us should endeavor to expand our understanding of who our neighbor is. And Jesus, again, teaches a lesson using the parable of the Good Samaritan. He uses the parable of the Good Samaritan to open up our eyes to who our neighbor actually is. It's not just the person that lives beside us. It's not just the person that lives on our street or on our block or in our neighborhood. Our neighbor, according to the parable of the Good Samaritan, is everybody. Right? It doesn't matter how much distance there is between us and them. They are our neighbor. It doesn't matter what their culture is, what their religion is, what their language is. It doesn't matter what baseball team or hockey team or football team they cheer for. They are our neighbor. Full stop. Everyone is our neighbor. Now this is a difficult thing, right? It's a difficult thing for us to truly grab. It's something that it requires practice. It's not just as simple as, I love everybody, because let's be fair, some people annoy us, some people frustrate us, some people make us very angry, some people terrify us. Some people have ripped our hearts out, broken them. So it's difficult for us to practice loving our neighbor as ourselves. It's difficult for us to expand our understanding and live by that understanding that everyone in this creation is our neighbor. Everyone in this creation is a child of God. Everyone in this creation is beloved of God. But it's the second thing he says that I think might be an even greater challenge for us, but one we need to take on. He says, assuming the best in others is always the best course of action, that we shouldn't assume the worst in one another. We shouldn't assume the worst in those folks or that person or that person. Assuming the best in others is always the best course of action. And this requires so much effort. It requires so much. It requires us to literally, I think, act in ways that are counter-instinctual. I mean, by design, We use our experiences, we use our history, we use our encounters, we use our knowledge as a way of helping us make safer and safer and safer and safer and safer decisions, as a way of keeping ourselves safe, keeping ourselves away from harm. And the more we've experienced something, the more we've seen, the more we make assumptions. And so when I see somebody doing something, I may be quick to assume that they are up to no good because I've seen the patterns before. I may assume that somebody is out to get me because I've seen these same things before. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's actually what's going on. Assuming the best in others is always the best course of action. It is such a huge challenge for us. Instead of relying on our instincts, instead of relying on our experiences, and instead of relying on our past, and listen, some of us have been harmed, some of us have been injured, some of us have been burned by others. We've suffered because of the actions of other people. And we don't want to suffer again. We don't want to be hurt again. We don't want to be harmed again. We don't want to have our hearts broken again. But assuming the best in others is always the best course of action. So if we can just take a beat, if we can just take a few seconds and maybe learn to expand that. Right? So it's a few seconds before a decision, or it's a few seconds before a conclusion. Maybe it's a few minutes before. We open it up so that we allow people to show us exactly what it is they're doing instead of jumping to a conclusion about what they're doing, instead of assuming we know what it is they're all about. Taking a second, taking a beat, taking a breath, and just allowing things to unfold a little bit more so that we can gain a little bit more information. I would love to get to a place where I am not assuming the worst in people. I would love to get to a place where I am not assuming that people are out to harm me or out to get me. I would love to get to a place where I am always assuming that people are up to nothing but lovely, wonderful, great things. I would love to get to a place where I don't assume anything. But I know that in my past, there's buried experiences and knowledge and insight. There's a history, and that history informs my decisions. It informs my views. It informs my assumptions. And I need to practice. I need to practice the art of opening those things up. Allowing them to speak, but not giving them control. Allowing them to offer insight, but not giving them the reins to make decisions in my reality. This is a challenge. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that you will pray for me as I try to do this more and more and more in my life. And I will pray for you if you'll join me. Amen. Numultus.